For over 200 years, a light has stood watch over St. Simon's Island, signaling arrival to ships at sea and guiding them through the shoals that guard the entrance to the Sound and the port of Brunswick, Georgia. The island's first lighthouse rose with the boom of the coast's cotton-rich antebellum period and fell along with the plantation era as Civil War swept ashore. A second lighthouse assumed the first tower's place of duty, casting the circling beam of its lamp out across sea and land. The tower was cared for by a series of faithful lightkeepers and their families. Today, the light still stands, still shines, still serves. It is a navigation beacon for arriving vessels and a welcoming landmark for arriving visitors. The lighthouse embraces St. Simon's Island's past, present, and future. Long before Europeans arrived in the New World, Native Americans plied the region's waterways to hunt, fish, and trade. When Europeans arrived, they too used these rivers and creeks as highways along the coast. In the late 1700s, the fledgling U.S. Navy sent men to St. Simon's Island to harvest the rock-like wood of live oaks to build warships. The most famous of these vessels, the USS Constitution, is still afloat. As the Navy was harvesting hardwoods, a much softer cash crop began to flourish. The commodity was cotton, and its cultivation shaped the history of the island for over 60 years. St. Simon's became home to over a dozen plantations, where enslaved people cultivated Sea Island cotton, a variety sought worldwide for its long, silky fibers. As the demand for Sea Island cotton increased, safe navigation of coastal waters became a concern for the many ships that departed with countless bales of the prized crop. In 1804, John Cooper, owner of Cannons Point Plantation, offered the federal government 4 acres of land that he owned on the south end of the island for a lighthouse. James Gould, a surveyor from Massachusetts, was hired to build the tower. Using tabby, a local building material composed of oyster shells, lime, sand, and water, Gould constructed a 75-foot octagonal tower. The beacon was completed in 1811, and Gould was appointed its first keeper. In 1857, a revolutionary lens designed by French scientist Augustin Fresnel was installed in the lighthouse. Fresnel's new technology used 2 types of prisms that magnified the rays of the light source and collected the light into a single, brighter beam. When Civil War erupted, one of President Lincoln's primary military objectives was to blockade key southern ports to stop the flow of supplies to Confederate troops. As the Union Navy tightened its blockade, the southern coast fell to Union forces. In autumn of 1861, fears of an impending Union attack grew. Confederate soldiers on St. Simons blew up the lighthouse to prevent the Union Navy from using it as a navigational aid. Early in 1862, Confederate General Robert E. Lee ordered troops garrisoned at Fort Brown near the St. Simons Lighthouse to abandon their position. When the Union Navy arrived in March 1862, they found St. Simons Island mostly deserted. The site of the first tower can be seen on the grounds of the current lighthouse. After the Civil War, the plantation economy collapsed and times were hard on St. Simons. Once again, the region's ability to grow high-demand products was the foundation for renewed industry on the island. As the need for Georgia pine by the northern states, England, and other countries across the Atlantic expanded rapidly, the lumber mill industry flourished, and large numbers of ships arrived and departed with goods and materials. In 1868, the United States Lighthouse Board's chief engineer, Orlando Poe, supervised the design of a new St. Simons Light Station. Georgia architect Charles Kluskey was hired to build the lighthouse and the connecting keeper's dwelling. Kluskey died from malaria before the 104-foot brick tower and the Italianate cottage were completed in 1872. A third-order Fresnel lens was again installed in the new tower, which today still broadcasts the light's beacon to ships as far away as 23 miles. Evenings are an ideal time to look toward the lighthouse and view the lens and beam in action. Eight full-time keepers served the St. Simons Lighthouse during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, at a time when the island's population numbered in the hundreds and travel to and from the island was only by boat. Although the island was beginning to attract seasonal visitors to its beaches, a lightkeeper's life was one of isolation and around-the-clock duty. Work at the light station was regimented, strenuous, and done strictly by the book. The official keeper's manual laid out detailed instructions for every task, from cleaning the lens with vinegar and water to painting the tower inside and out. An hour before sunset each evening, the keeper climbed the tower to fuel and light the kerosene lamp. There, the keeper would wind the clockwork weights that rotated the panels to create the light's flash pattern. And during the long nights, the keeper trimmed the lamp's wick to keep the flame steady and bright. Often, other members of the family helped with chores, and sometimes the keeper's wife was his official assistant. The lighthouse and keeper's dwelling had to be well maintained at all times, ready for surprise inspections by the district superintendent. Keepers took pride in maintaining an immaculate station. In the 1880s, the local newspaper praised keeper Isaac Peckham and his wife Dora for having the best light of any station in the 6th District. Carl Svensson and his family served as keepers at the lighthouse from 1907 until 1935. Svensson's son Carl Jr. remembers a happy life, fishing and exploring the island. He also remembers that their dog Jinx was often spooked by the sound of mysterious footsteps in the tower. The footsteps were thought to be the ghost of keeper Frederick Osborne, who was shot and killed by his assistant in 1880. The beacon atop the St. Simons Lighthouse was converted from flickering flame to reliable electricity in the 1930s. The early 1950s brought automation to the light's systems, and the need for a resident keeper was eliminated. Since 1965, the Coastal Georgia Historical Society has been a faithful steward of the historic buildings entrusted to our care, including the St. Simon's Lighthouse and Keeper's Dwelling, and the historic Coast Guard Station at East Beach. Today, these buildings are operated as one of only 15 museums in the state of Georgia accredited by the American Alliance of Museums. We invite you to follow in the footsteps of the original keepers of the St. Simon's Lighthouse. Explore the history-rich exhibits of the Lighthouse Museum in the dwelling where they once lived. And climb the 129 steps to the top of the tower they once climbed. No keeper awaits you there, but you will enjoy the same spectacular views that have captivated visitors for over 200 years.